When you hear the word genius, what names come to your mind? Well, if you live here in Silicon Valley, you'll probably think of the names of some of the people who have made all the innovation we see possible here. Names like Bill Gates or Steve Wozniak. But I think in the long run of history, there's one name that stands out above all the rest. And today we're going to explore the mind of this genius at the world premiere of the largest and most comprehensive collection of the innovative art, science, and engineering projects of Leonardo da Vinci and his Renaissance contemporaries. And to help us understand the mind of this genius is probably the world's preeminent authority on Leonardo, and that's Dr. Paolo Gazzulli. And Dr. Gazzulli is also the professor of the history of science at the University of Florence. So come join me as we explore the mind of this genius and perhaps get some perspective on the wonderful innovations that we see around us today, which actually were seen by Leonardo. Let's have a look.
We have not to forget that there is a very popular vision of Leonardo which is totally wrong. The genius isolated from the context. The man who first understood things that were not known and we have been discovering much later on. The person who was by himself finding solution to very complicated problems. It's not true at all. Leonardo was living in this context and was trained by great masters. I say this because this is very obvious, of course. Everybody, also the most talented people, look at what the others are doing and trying to learn as much as possible from what the others have done. And this was the case for Leonardo, and this is why this exhibition is different from the many other exhibitions that has been devoted to this great genius. This exhibition has two major concepts. The first one is recreating the context of Leonardo's unique experience. So it's not just about Leonardo. It's about the world in which Leonardo was born, developed his ideas, and showed his great, inimitable talent. So your visit will pass through a couple of generations before Leonardo entered the scene, the beginning of the 15th century, showing the great achievements and the innovative brain of a man like Filippo Brunelleschi, the author of the Dome of Florence Cathedral. Not simply of that, but we have selected this very daring, innovative, costly, difficult to manage and endeavor to present this fantastic personality. Brunelleschi was an architect, was an inventor of machines. You will see a few of his inventions. One is there on my right. Fantastic machines, absolutely competitive to the Leonardo's machines. Put them into practice, organized the construction yards in 20 years, built these fantastic edified fabrics. And finally, he was responsible not simply of the technical side, was responsible of the aesthetic side, the planning, was responsible of the organizational side, was running the hundreds and hundreds of workers under him, and he was really the beginning of the modern figure of the entrepreneur, who knows about what you're doing, how you make that as soon as possible with the lowest cost as possible. And immediately after you go into a different scenery, there is the Siena, nearby city to Florence, competing with Florence, where other talented engineers were at the same time artists and technicians were showing their talents, especially in hydraulic technology, because Siena was suffering for lack of water, and the solution of taking water into Siena has been fundamental for the development of the civilization, Sienese civilization. It would have been possible to get the development of any community without water. Water, not simply for drinking, but as a source of energy, of course. And then finally we enter Leonardo's world, and we discover this unique personality, but we are now possibly prepared to understand that he's not an isolated genius. He's rather was the best guy undoubtedly among all these people, but he's the culmination of the process and is absolutely necessary if you want to understand Leonardo, to look at the context in which he developed his talents. And when you enter Leonardo, you now try to see which is really what distinguishes character, what distinguishes his way of looking at things from all the other predecessors, great predecessors. But Leonardo is different. Leonardo's mind is different. Leonardo is looking at things with a different eye, both the eye of the forehead and the eye of the brain. And the final part of this huge exhibition is devoted to analyze the very peculiar way in which Leonardo's geniality was expressed through his very peculiar brain and mind. So he was looking at things simultaneously from many points of view. The mind of the artist, the mind of the technician, the mind of the scientist were all working at the same time. It was not like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was making the scientist during the daylight and then at night was turning to artistic, or vice versa if you prefer. No, Leonardo was putting all these talents all together at the same thing. So if you look at Machine by Leonardo, these are beautiful artistic objects. And if you look at artistic production, you will see that this concern for statical balance, for realistic illumination coming from a knowledge of optics and creation of shadow, which is plausible in sense of optical science, were coming all together. I believe it's the first time that Leonardo has been approached in this way. Not cutting into pieces Leonardo's personality, the inventor, the technologist, the scientist, the painter, the architect, the anatomist, the flying scientist, the flying machine scientist. For the first time you will see Leonardo all together, as Leonardo was, of course. As Leonardo, he was doing at the same time many different things that we would classify into art, science, and technology. That was not the way to understand the uniqueness of Leonardo's mind. In the exhibition, we have used many different communication media. Working models, nothing similar has been built up to now in terms of seriousness. That means faithful adhesion to the graphic models left by the engineers and Leonardo. Respect of materials. We use historically plausible materials. We have sometimes in documents indication of the kind of timber they were using. We have used that timber in building the working models. In terms of scale indication, in terms of contextualization of the origin and purpose of machines. The second strategy is made by graphics. Graphics is made here in serigraphies, beautiful serigraphies, because we want to give evidence to the documents, the original documents we have. We do not have the machines from the 15th century. We have the drawings of the machines, and we need to let the visitor be able to evaluate if our translation into 3D of a 2D document is acceptable, is correct, is understandable. These drawings are also beautiful drawings. Also, when these people were doing technical drawing, they were not forgetting being artists at the same time. So these are works of art who express technical ideas and which we have translated into working machines. The third component of this communication strategy is made by the possibility of exploring the working of these very complex, sometimes, devices. We have used, these machines are powerful machines. They work, but I assume that the museum will not let freely work to visitors. They are powerful. You could easily break a hand or a finger using them. So we have metal small-scale replica side that you are free to manipulate and you can understand better because machines are understood when you make them work. And moreover, also to allow people to enter into the machines and see the invisible parts of them, We have made extensive use of multimedia technology. We will have lots of screens during the exhibition where you can manipulate machines, seeing them into context, another problem that models do not give. That machine was into a context. The context was the central part of the church upon which the dome was built. But we cannot reconstruct the route. So in multimedia we can simulate that, and we can locate that machine where it was posed and see the purpose of this working. So you have lots of multimedia. We have started, I think, with this exhibition as being the first to use multimedia on a systematic scale about 12 years ago. And even this makes appropriate to show in Silicon Valley, I believe, because it's been a pioneering experience in this specific field, museography, and we still go in Florence very much ahead on that direction. We exploit a lot digital technologies to make the objects be able to talk to the public and to express all their inner codes that are often beyond the capacity of people to understand directly. So these are the key words, if I can call them, like that context, the mind of Leonardo seen as a unifying action power and not separated into chapters. In the final section divided to Leonardo, you will not find separated section for art, architecture. You will find the concern by Leonardo for the form, for the motion, for the representation. And the three categories will be applied to all the kind of subjects that Leonardo dealt with, the many different subjects in which he measured his talent. So I hope you will enjoy that. I stop here. I'm, of course, open to questions. And I expect that we will interact more during the guided tour.
Which, when it's spinning around, it goes. All right, let's say there's a stick right here. Right, watch this for a sec. See, let's say there's a stick right here. It's spinning around like this in one spot, which makes it go around in a circle, which makes it go like that. And then there's a plastic bar that connects to that one, makes it do that. I understand it clearly. Like the back of my hand.
Alex, I know what the TikToks are for. Come on.
What's this?
we have not to forget that there is a very popular vision of Leonardo which is totally wrong. The genius isolated from the context. The man who first understood things that were not known and we have been discovering much later on. The person who was by himself finding solution to very complicated problems. It's not true at all. Leonardo was living in this context and was trained by great masters. I say this because this is very obvious, of course. Everybody, also the most talented people, look at what the others are doing and trying to learn as much as possible from what the others have done. And this was the case for Leonardo, and this is why this exhibition is different from the many other exhibitions that has been devoted to this great genius. This exhibition has two major concepts. The first one is recreating the context of Leonardo's unique experience. So it's not just about Leonardo. It's about the world in which Leonardo was born, developed his ideas, and showed his great, inimitable talent. So your visit will pass through a couple of generations before Leonardo entered the scene, at the beginning of the 15th century, showing the great achievements and the innovative brain of a man like Filippo Brunelleschi, the author of the Dome of Florence Cathedral.